welcome to Business Connections. I'm Holly Allen with the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. Today we are talking about human resources, which is a complicated industry to be in, and it is vital to business success because in most cases for a business, their workforce is their biggest investment. My guests today are Marc Fleischauer, he is an attorney at Coolidge Wall, and Ashley Mack with Montgomery County Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services, which we call ADAMHS. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate both of your time. So both of you will be speaking at the upcoming HR forum that the Chamber is putting on March 22nd, correct?
Right.
So we look forward to seeing you there, but we're going to get a little sneak peek of what you'll be talking about. And I just want to do an overall to start, Marc, from a legal perspective. Why is it so important that employers and HR professionals keep up to date on some of the hot topics going on for their professional development to keep them up to date?
Well, what I'm finding is that the HR field, the profession, is becoming more and more like the legal field. For better or for worse, HR professionals, I think, need to understand kind of trends that are going on in the community, but they also need to understand the law in a lot of cases, and the law changes over time. And one of these topics we're going to be talking about that I'm going to be speaking at the forum about is this Me Too movement, which is sort of the intersection between sort of social media, current events, pop culture to some extent, and what's been kind of a long-standing anti-discrimination, anti-harassment requirement in the workplace. So this is a good example of opportunity for HR folks to come out, learn more about a topic that is already sort of near and dear to them, but in a new light and in a different way of looking at it. And I know the Chamber is making HRCI credits available. That's Human Resources Certification Institute credits available. So some HR folks who are part of the professional SHRM organization use those credits to show continuing education in their field, and that's very important, and we're happy to be a part of that, and delighted that the Chamber's making that sort of value add available for participants.
That's a good point, Marc. I think HR professionals are more and more being expected to wear multiple hats, and sometimes legalities are one of those areas where they kind of, rely on their HR professional to stay up to date there. So that's a good point, and a good opportunity for them to continue their education. Sure. So I want to switch gears, and we'll get to that Me Too movement that you're going to talk about at the HR forum, Marc. But one of the issues that's really hitting us all pretty hard lately, and in turn has been affecting our workforce, is the opioid crisis, which is what you'll be discussing, Ashley, at the HR forum. Can you give us an idea of just how prevalent this issue has been as far as affecting people in the workplace and employers and their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, really since around 2007, we've seen the opiate epidemic kind of just continuing to rise. We've seen more and more individuals using opiates, whether it was for legitimate pain because of recovering from an injury or from a surgery. And then that kind of coincided with how the economic recession hit Dayton. And so we had a lot of individuals who were unemployed, but then also using opiates. And as we continue to go, down this decade of how individuals were medicating themselves, and then as we saw businesses kind of recovering from the economic recession, they were looking to increase their employment, and they got to the point where there wasn't a viable workforce that they could necessarily count on because so many individuals were self-medicating and increasing the misuse of opiates. And so now what we're seeing is even more so with the increase in fentanyl and heroin, that it's really affecting the workers, and then in return it's affecting our employers and the businesses. And so they're searching for different ways that they can help their employee base, as well as how they can be better prepared for issues like the opiate epidemic.
Absolutely. What will you be talking about at the HR forum as far as what HR professionals and business leaders should be looking for to spot issues with their employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, it's about noticing the signs and symptoms of opiate abuse and really being familiar with what those are. There's a lot of different ways to do that, whether it be through employers seeking out that information, whether online or through trainings that ADAMHS does offer. But some of the symptoms that you really want to pay attention to would be a decrease in motivation, the way that an individual presents themselves at work. You could see a decrease in the way that they look, and also the quality of work that they have. Those are important things to pay attention to, as well as an increase in absenteeism and things like that. So we'll be talking a little bit about that at the forum, but we'll also be talking about other ways that employers can educate their workforce, because we know as adults we spend half of our lives or more in the work field, right? And so employers have a great place to educate their employees on the proper use of opiates, so that way they're informed, right? And then from there, really helping businesses prepare themselves with the proper drug-free workplace policies that they can institute in order to best support themselves and also the employees that they have hired.
That's good information. And you'll be talking about all of that at the forum?
Absolutely, yes. We'll go into a lot of detail about our Wellness at Work program that ADAMHS is sponsoring. And just to offer a little bit of information about that, it is open to any business here in Montgomery County. And what it does, the Wellness at Work program basically helps to educate our employers on the proper ways to implement a drug-free workplace policy. And then that also includes how to create a system to attract and retain quality employees, as well as second chance policies within that. So really it's supporting the business and making sure that they're legally and they're supported in a legally sound way, but they're also supporting their employee base as well.
Perfect. I was going to ask you about resources for businesses, so you covered that. Thank you, Ashley, for that information on opioid, on the crisis. Marc, I'm going to talk to you about the Me Too movement now, because you mentioned that that's something you'll be discussing at the HR forum. If someone's unfamiliar, this effort is to support and end sexual violence and sexual harassment. It's getting a lot of attention just in overall pop culture, but employers are really thinking again about how they're approaching this topic and how they're protecting their employees. What's your advice to employers who are maybe taking another look at the policies they have in place and how they handle these situations?
Sure, and in a way, I think there's good news and bad news that comes with this whole hashtag Me Too movement. I think the good news, and actually I don't see this in the media particularly, but thinking about it from an employment law perspective, I think it's good news in a lot of ways that the media, where this is erupting right now, is sort of, it started in the Hollywood arena and in the major media. We see CBS and Hollywood studios and so forth being the birthplace of the Me Too movement. But I think the good news is that that's because I think those industries have been sort of sheltered from what has otherwise been a very broad and widely accepted movement, which is to have much more respect for people's boundaries, certainly much more respect for women in the workplace than had been in the past. And so these laws have been on the books for a long time. Title VII's been around since the 60s, and that prohibits discrimination and harassment based on sex in the workplace.
Right.
But I think, again, I think the good part of Me Too is that it's rooting out these problems and this kind of misconduct in the last industry that hasn't really stepped up to those modern standards. And so I think it's a good thing. I think this is recognizing the last gasp of accepted or tolerated harassment in the workplace in this unique industry. The bad news from an employer standpoint, I'm the jaded management side employment lawyer on this, but I think my clients are doing the right things. The perspective that I have is that the companies want to root this stuff out, that they want to know about it so that they can act on it, and the Me Too movement is creating it's a spotlight on this issue. And that's, again, that's a good thing if we're getting rid of it in the workplace. It can be a very delicate thing and a difficult thing, I think, for employers that are already doing the right thing.
Right.
That want to have proper policies in place, that are already training their employees, and more importantly, just creating a culture that does not tolerate that sort of conduct in the workplace. So because of this sort of blend now, it's become a pop culture movement in a lot of ways. I think employers need to be very aware of publicity. They have to be very aware of social media and the power of that. So the concern I would have is that a lot of employers who take these things very seriously and deal with them internally suddenly now have another dimension to think about, and that is if an internal issue that they would normally resolve privately becomes a very public issue, then suddenly the company's reputation can be at stake, individuals' lives can really be affected. And again, harassment has always been a terrible thing for the victims. To also now complicate that by making, I think, somewhat more difficult to resolve issues.
Right.
And so we're going to explore those dynamics at the forum, and sort of the good news and the bad news, and as we're saying, are you prepared? What are you doing, from a legal advice standpoint? Get your policies in order, get ahead of these issues before they erupt. That's the best advice.
Right.
And we kind of have two roles at our firm, so we'll do what I call sort of the preventative planning or preventative maintenance to avoid issues, but we also do the picking up the pieces part if something's really gone wrong, and we'd really rather focus on the former, and a good informed HR professional working on the inside can help with that.
Absolutely. I think it's important, and I think you're right. I think many businesses are now, this is their opportunity to take another look at their policies and make sure that they're doing everything correctly, that they're protecting their employees, they make sure that they have the policies in place to handle if something were to happen in their workplace. So.
And be thinking about outside communications more than ever, because again, very private facts suddenly become public, spread like wildfire. And if you don't have a plan to address the public face of the issue, then you're going to get in trouble with this movement in social media, because sometimes allegations are true and sometimes they're not, but the response has to be there, and you have to protect the company's reputation, and also, again, just make sure you're doing the right thing internally. Right.
Well, this all sounds like it will be very helpful to our HR professionals who will be coming to the HR Forum. Again, this is March 22nd. Is there anything I missed that the two of you wanted to discuss about what you'll be talking about at the HR Forum?
I don't think so. I think we've covered the waterfront, I think.
Well, I look forward to hearing the both of you talk. Thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate your time to give us a little sneak peek to see what you'll be talking about. Those are just a couple of the topics that will be covered in greater detail at the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce's HR Forum on March 22nd. It will be held at Sinclair Conference Center, and you can register for that event at daytonchamber.org. Registration is now open. Thank you for being with us. I'm Holly Allen, Director of Marketing and Communications at the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. You can hear from us more on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, but stay tuned now for a message from our President and CEO, Phil Parker.
Recently, our region was recognized for having the best job growth in the state over the 12 months between December 2016 and this past December. It grew by over 10,500 jobs, or 2.8% during that time period, outpacing other Ohio metropolitan areas. Our growth was a mix of several industries, including manufacturing, construction, and of course, our growing area of logistics and distribution. At the Chamber's recently sponsored Dayton Area Logistics Association Conference, attendees were able to share a great deal about the growth opportunities that lie ahead for our region. Being centered at the crossroads of I-75 and I-70, as well as in close proximity to a majority of the nation's population, the Dayton region will continue to see more growth of this industry during this decade and into the next. But we still have challenges, specifically with trained workers and licensed truck drivers. According to Chris Spear, President of the American Trucking Association and keynote speaker at the conference, we have a national driver shortage and will need to lure about 90,000 new drivers every year for each of the next 10 years in the U.S. just to meet demand. The Dayton area will need its share too, which is why so many of us are trying to bring more emphasis to this industry and its need for properly skilled drivers and distribution workers. Today's program allows us to talk about many of these opportunities and challenges that we face here in the region that is building a strong reputation for logistics services. We hope you've enjoyed today's program.